Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. This is another video introducing a Chaosium team member. I sat down with Brian Holland, who is the marketing director at Chaosium. Brian has also worked at a bunch of cool places like at Paradox Interactive and on World of Darkness. He's written for Chaosium as well as working as the marketing director, and in this interview he talks about his pathway into Chaosium and talks about what it's like to be a marketing director for a TTRPG company. I'll jump across the interview in just a moment, but first, please remember to subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Hey, I'm Brian Holland. I'm the marketing director here at Chaosium, where we get to dream the dreams of dead gods and construct the world from its essential runes, as I like to say.
Can you talk a little bit about what a marketing director does in a TTRPG company?
Sure. I mean, it's a very broad job, which is one of the reasons I like it, because no 2 days of mine look the same. Like we oversee all of our social media. I liaise a lot with graphic designers about our promotional tools. We write marketing campaigns for upcoming books and products. Another thing I sort of do is some sort of high level stuff about looking at release windows. So a really cool part of my job is getting to look, like up to a year in advance of what's going to be coming out and helping sort of coordinate when the best time to release those things are. And I also get to say, like, when can we start yelling about stuff, which is always really cool, because then you get to work with the writers and their creative team and let them know when they can finally start telling everybody and sharing stuff about projects that in some cases they've been working on for years. So that's pretty cool. I do a lot of other stuff as well. Obviously, we coordinate a lot with influencers and sponsorships. I write the back cover text for most of our products. So that's cool. That's why it's obviously so good. No, it's a cool job, and there's a bunch of other things that there's some things I wouldn't actually be cool to talk about, but there's some really cool, broad, interesting things we get to do, which is cool.
And you also do some other work. You work as a writer for Chaosium and things like that.
Yeah, so I have sort of separately to my position as marketing director, I've written a few things for Chaosium. So I've written a Call of Cthulhu solo adventure called Alone Against the Static, which is coming out in December of this year. I've written another Call of Cthulhu supplement, which is still in manuscript stage and has been submitted and somewhere in the pipeline. I'm not sure where. And I've also, written some scenarios and stuff for various things. One of which is coming up in a collection that you, Jamie, are actually curating, which I don't think we're talking about when that's coming out yet. But that's something that it might be coming out at some stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to speak to marketing about that.
Yeah, you should.
Marketing director is a term that appears in a few different industries. It's a recognizable job, but what I always like to ask is when you have a recognizable job title in the TTRPG industry, it's never the same. It's always different. It's always got a unique spin on it. So what's different about being a marketing director in TTRPGs than a marketing director anywhere else?
I would honestly say it's because, I'm friends with marketing directors for other companies, like Aaron Shanks at Paizo, for example, they make Pathfinder. And one of the biggest differences, I think, will be in just the size and scope of each company that you work for. Like, I'm sure I have a counterpart who works on D&D at Wizards of the Coast, and I'm sure our jobs look extremely different because Chaosium's been around for a long time, but we're still. We've got a lot of new stuff that's coming out. We've got new editions of Pendragon. We've got like this latest edition of RuneQuest, which is still, in many ways in its infancy. And I think the kind of things that you do when you have products that are sort of new and you're trying to introduce to a new audience is very different to when you've got a very long-standing, well-established product in the market, if that makes sense.
I already know some of these questions because you and I are both Australians. We have I've met and spoken in the real world, but let me ask you about your background a bit. You've kind of come from a board game logistics physical kind of world, at least for a while. Can you talk a little bit about your pathway into Chaosium?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually just talking to a friend about this the other day because I've got a very weird career trajectory. I worked in fashion retail for a long time. I was actually a manager at Ralph Lauren. For those who may be watching who have heard of Ralph Lauren, or if you've watched Friends, it's the company that what's her name, the Rachel on Friends works for. So I worked there for a long time. People are often like, wow, that's weird considering what you do now. And yes, it is. So I worked there for a while, and then I decided, I don't know, like 5 years in, that like, wow, I really don't want to do this. So I took a very, very big pay cut and got a job at just a local games retail store. And I was managing that store, and then I became their events manager and a community manager, and I did all that kind of stuff. And with that game store, I actually got to travel to Gen Con for work for the first time. I'd been to Gen Con once, sort of like as a punter. And on that work trip, I also took some meetings with some folks at Chaosium, some folks at what was then White Wolf, and some folks at Modifius, and I basically got a few different little sort of freelance jobs doing various different things. And then I got to a point where the amount of freelance work that was available to me, if I was taking it all, I was actually going to be earning more money than if I stayed at the game store. So after about 3 years, I quit the game store and I said, like, I'm going to try going freelance with a few different companies, and I'm going to try that for a year and see if it works. And luckily, sort of at the end of that year, Chaosium slowly increased my work until I sort of became full-time, and we sorted that out, and now I'm full-time with the company and have been for, like 3 years now already? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's sneaking up.
One of the things I love to know is, what is a good example of your work in the TTRPG industry at large? So taking kind of your work with Chaosium out for a second, you look at some of the other marketing out there that's being done. What kind of trends within marketing for games do you like? What kind of stuff do you maybe think is not as effective? But what's the landscape?
Yeah, like one of the most interesting things from the marketing perspective going on right now in the industry, I think, is probably things like the Orc license, which is the open RPG creative license that friends at Paizo have put together and that Chaosium is now a part of. And while this is obviously like what this means is that people can use the mechanics and things that we write into the Orc license, both here and at Paizo or whatever other company wants to sign on to the Orc license. People can use those free of charge, like royalty free, and create their own stuff. Now, this might sound a bit weird because that doesn't directly result in sort of sales of our stuff, me saying, hey, you can go and make your own game using our mechanics for free. But it actually it comes into a thing that I kind of miss doing full time, which I did for a little while, which was community management, and sort of getting to engage with young designers and other people who are looking for, basically, they've got a really interesting creative world that they've built, that they are trying to build a game around, and being able to sort of market to those people in terms of like, hey, why don't you try this system for your game, and get to see how our games can flourish in other environments, I suppose. And sort of just promoting that as a concept is something that I think is really interesting right now. And it goes beyond just what we're all trying to do, which is get people to buy and play our games. Like, that's what every marketing director's job ultimately is to do, is to get more people to buy and play our games. And this is, with the Orc license being a big thing, it gives us the opportunity to promote something that I think is a bit beyond that. And I think it's sort of unique to this industry, at least at this moment in time.
Let me ask you a tricky question. With the social media landscape changing a little bit at the minute, considering a lot of platforms are going through big shifts, has that altered your job in a big way?
Yeah, look, it's not my favorite thing. When people with too much money and not enough sense sort of mess around with social platforms that we have spent quite a lot of time and effort cultivating it, we kind of don't want to let go of it. And at least part of me is like, I kind of hope this all just stops and goes back to normal soon. But yeah, having to find not new homes, but like alternative spaces where people are now gathering, it can be difficult, and some of them are more time consuming than others. For instance, like no one's really marketing via Discord, despite the fact that's obviously where most people are. Like Instagram makes a big difference, and then it's like, cool, should we be on Blue Sky, or should we be on what's the other one, Threads? Or remember that week when everyone was on Hive? Just everybody from the TTRPG industry was on Hive for like a week, and they might still be there, but I don't know. And then the other difficulty is when you're at a company like the size of Chaosium or bigger, you're not sitting there doing every individual post and sending it. Like you're automating it and scheduling them in advance. And the kind of tools that we use to do that don't always integrate with some of these new platforms. So that does even make it more sort of time intensive to be like, cool, we want to start posting more to Threads. The only way for us to do that currently is to manually do it like on my phone or whatever, which is not as fun. So look, it's there's definitely a shakeup going on. I will be really curious to see where the dust settles, but I'm more excited just for the dust to settle so we can get back to knowing exactly what we're doing rather than having to try it all out, I suppose.
As a kind of final topic, I want to talk about what people can do to bolster their own marketing if they are pursuing a career in tabletop role-playing games, or they just want to get a product out there or whatever it is. I am not great at posting on my own social media platforms, and it really does seem like a superpower that some people are able to do and some people maybe just can't. But I'm sure that's not it, because everything is practice and everything is learnable. So what advice do you have for people who want to kind of break in and start building themselves an online presence?
Yeah, I think I mean, there's so many things I could say. I think the best piece of advice I could probably give is, marketing is ultimately about putting your product in front of people who might like to buy it. And yeah, you could do, like, you could buy a Facebook ad and say, I'm going to pay $200 to have this reach 15 million people. And, that'll sound really good because you're like, wow, that's so many people. Like, surely you're going to hit someone who might want to buy your game. And I think a better thing to do, particularly if you're like an independent publisher, is to try and find where the people who might like to buy your game are. Like, get more and more hyper specific. If you're an indie publisher, you probably have something that's sort of off the wall and very different to what the main big publishing houses are putting out. So I don't know, if you've got a role playing game about Mexican telenovelas or something like that. Don't buy that 15 million people ad, because that's very broad. I mean, I wouldn't even buy the role-playing game ad because that's not specific enough. I would be like, cool, I wonder if we can go to like the subreddit for Mexican telenovelas and advertise there, because those people we know like this thing, and therefore they might be more interested in buying our game. I suppose if that makes sense. I would say you're much better off advertising to 150 people who are diehard fans of the thing that you are doing, or at least adjacent to the thing that you're doing, than a room full of 1,000 people who might sort of be interested in games in general.